Hey, what's up YouTubers? Alex here, back again today for another video. It's been a while now since my last upload to YouTube. I think my last video was a vinyl update. Yeah, it was my birthday edition vinyl update, so yeah, that must have been 2 or 3 weeks ago. So apologies for the lack of videos, lack of content on my channel. I haven't run for the hills and abandoned you guys. I haven't, quit the channel or anything. It's just been very intermittent this summer when it comes to YouTube, due to, well, mainly due to me having a pretty heavy part-time job, which, especially recently, has kind of picked up in pace. I've been doing, a fair few hours and a fair few shifts in the bar that I work in. And they've had lots of summer functions and parties and things on up there, so I've been called into work a fair bit this summer, and it's been good for my wallet and been good for my financial situation, considering how much debt I'm in and how much money I owe to people. So it's been good for that, but obviously it hasn't left tons of time for other things like making videos and interacting with the VC. But yeah, I wanted to come back on here today and make a video. I thought it was about time. And I wanted to talk about something which I've been looking forward to all summer. And this specific release that I want to talk about today, it came out about 2 weeks ago. I think it came out on August the 26th. Certainly in this country it came out, I think, on August the 26th of this year. So just over 2 weeks ago, or just under 2 weeks ago. And yeah, I was looking forward to this all summer. I couldn't wait to hear it and couldn't wait to hear how, the job they'd done with this. And I picked it up on release day from my record store, went down there after work and picked it up. And ever since then, I've been wanting to make a video and kind of give my 2 cents on this. And of course, what I wanted to talk about today is the latest release from a certain Mr. Bob Dylan. And the album is Another Self-Portrait, the latest installment in Dylan's ongoing bootleg series. This is volume 10 now, covering the years 1969 to 1971. And yeah, he put this out about 2 weeks ago in a variety of different versions. I picked up the standard 2 CD version, as you can see. I tend to do this for all of the Dylan bootlegs. I can't really afford to shell out, in excess of £70–80 for, one of the more expensive versions. In regards to this specific bootleg, Another Self-Portrait, there were 3 versions that I had the option of picking. The first one, of course, was the entry-level 2 CD set, as you can see, $14.99. Can't go wrong. Bang it straight on the iPhone, and you're ready to go. So that was the one I ended up picking, and I'll go into the packaging in just a second. The other 2 versions, of course, they had a deluxe edition of this, which looked interesting, I have to say. It was a 4 CD set in a nice box. It came with 2 hardcover booklets of some kind, with all the different kinds of information, essays, promotional posters, limited edition photographs, and it looked like a really nice, kind of deluxe edition, collector's edition, I guess you could say. It also came with, I believe, 2 bonus CDs, extra CDs. The 3rd CD in the deluxe edition was a complete Isle of Wight show, obviously been remastered, the show that Dylan did in 1969 with the band, his first public, big concert in 3 years. In 1969, obviously he went over there to play the Isle of Wight, and as far as I know, there aren't any official recordings of that. They didn't do like a soundboard recording of it. I think there were only kind of audience recordings and kind of lesser quality recordings, so I don't know what they've done precisely with remastering that, but that was the 3rd CD. And then the 4th CD was a complete remastered version of the original Self-Portrait, which is obviously what's being reinterpreted on Another Self-Portrait. So that was the 4th CD. So it was a nice set 4 CDs and 2 bonus booklets, which would have been nice to have and to see, obviously being such a wild and huge fan of Bob's stuff, but I couldn't stretch the budget. It was like £75, £80 I think, which was kind of excessive, I thought, for a couple of extra things. The final version, of course, was the vinyl pressing of this, which was a pretty reasonable price, I thought, for a Dylan bootleg. Normally they're much more money. The one in my store was £50 for a 3 LP box set of Another Self-Portrait, which would have been nice to get. I was pondering over it for quite some time. I was just sat there with, the vinyl and the CD in my hand and just trying to decide which one to buy. But again, I kind of wanted to save my money for other things, and ended up picking this little bad boy here, the standard 2 CD version, which I want to talk about today. So in terms of packaging and the way they've done this this CD is pretty much standard in terms of the bootleg series. I think it's pretty much exactly the same job as they did with the Whipmark demos, which came out a couple of years ago, I think in 2010 or 2011. Must have been 2010. And in terms of the packaging, it comes in this hardcover slipcase, which is kind of hard cardstock with the track listing there on the back and a picture of Bob, and a kind of textured front cover, which is nice. Then it comes with obviously the 2 CDs in a standard jewel case. Open it up and you've got 1 CD there with the recreated 70s labels, which is always nice to see. And then you open it up from here and you've got the 2nd CD on the inside. So they've done a good job with the jewel case, again pretty standard for a Dylan bootleg. And then on top of that, another thing you get with pretty much all of the bootleg series volumes is a bonus glossy booklet, and this one was no exception. Very, very nice thing to put in. Won't flick through all of this, but it's about 50 pages, I'd say, of unreleased photos, essays, memoirs from people that knew Bob at the time, people that worked with him on some of these albums, and some great stuff in here, promotional posters and things that were used to promote his albums and concerts at the time, studio photos. These are, I imagine, 7 inches that he was putting out at the time. And obviously this was during the period of, many people say, his country era. I never really liked that distinction because he was going way deeper into kind of Americana and American song at this time, I believe. But many people classify it as his country period, and he was trying lots of different things at this time, straying away from everything that had made him famous back in the mid to early 60s. And it was a controversial and highly musically active time for Bob, even though he was pretty much still in seclusion and removed from the public eye. So yeah, this booklet does a good job of kind of bringing all that stuff together and telling the story behind the music, and it's good stuff if you're a Dylan fanatic like me. So you get those 2 things, pretty standard, very, very good for $14.99. I thought definitely worth it. Definitely beats buying it digitally, which I did consider for a moment because I was very, very short of money when I heard about this. But $14.99 for what you get in here, I would totally recommend if you're just looking to listen to this on your iPhone or iPod. And yeah, in terms of packaging, can't fault this. Definitely worth a pickup. So yeah, I talked a bit there about the history behind Another Self-Portrait. Obviously the name is pretty self-explanatory. If you know anything about Dylan, he obviously has a very illustrious career that goes back, decades and decades, back to the early 60s. And he was releasing music. It's hard to, kind of comprehend now that he was putting out music, back in 62. So it's 51 years ago now that his first album came out. And, this really, 1969 to 1971, the years that this bootleg specifically focuses on, is just really a snapshot, I guess, in a much bigger picture of his overall career. And even, this point in his career, the 60s and 70s were obviously when he was at the peak of his powers and the peak of his songwriting ability, well, most people think anyway. But another self-portrait is pretty much a reinterpretation of, what he was trying to do musically during these years, and obviously focuses on 3 albums which he put out during those years, starting off with Nashville Skyline, which came out in 1969. One of my least favorite Bob albums, I have to say. Doesn't really do anything for me. I did like it when I initially heard it, but after listening to New Morning, I think that's a much more dialed in and a refined version of the sound that he was working on at this time. But yeah, Nashville Skyline, which came out in 1969. Moving on to Self-Portrait in 1970, which is perhaps Dylan's most misunderstood work, his most misunderstood album. If you're going back, through the years, there's been many albums that Dylan has put out which, have pretty much been met with very, very critical reviews, because people don't like him to do things, which they're not familiar with. And I guess when Self-Portrait came out back in 1970, people were just completely alienated by what he was doing, just putting out pretty much a collection of covers, and it was just going against, straying away from everything that had made him the 60s icon and troubadour of songwriting and protest and rebellion, and just saying, fuck you to all those people, and just releasing a collection of covers, which is pretty much what he was doing before he was made famous, by his songwriting. So it's interesting, looking at that after listening to that album, Self-Portrait, which came out in 1970. And it definitely makes you look at it through a different set of eyes, from a different angle, I guess. And this, for me, is kind of the missing piece of the puzzle for that period of his career, which I consider to be his most misunderstood. But it's, kind of the missing piece, kind of sheds light on, what he was trying to accomplish with Self-Portrait and Nashville Skyline and New Morning. These albums which many people don't consider to be some of his best. But yeah, going through the albums, New Morning was the next album to come out and the final album that this bootleg focuses on, which for me is a great album, kind of a return to form for Dylan in the early 70s before, he was to put out some, masterpieces in the mid-70s. But New Morning kind of signified to me a return to form in regards to songwriting, in regards to, kind of musical direction. His voice was getting more raw and more appealing again. And so New Morning is a good album to me. Still listening back to it, it still sounds good to me. So this bootleg here focuses on those 3 albums and, kind of tries to shed new light on them with alternate versions of songs, alternate takes, unreleased tracks that never made it onto the album specifically, but I imagine most of them were considered for the albums, especially Self-Portrait, which really was a mashup of things back in the 70s. It was a complete mashup of covers and songs that he'd written during 1967 for the Basement Tapes, kind of things that he had left over that he kind of just threw together into a big mixing bowl and stirred up. But yeah, another Self-Portrait. Really, really enjoyed the bootleg. I can't say it's my favourite one of the series so far. I probably would go back to Live 66 from the Royal Albert Hall, actually Manchester Free Trade Hall, but the Royal Albert Hall show as being my favourite one. I also like the series 1 to 3 and the Whitmark demos as well. But this one here was really impressive to me. I love what they did with this, and for focusing on a period which by no means is my favourite of Dylan's. It's not a period I'm that fond of. I think this bootleg has definitely improved my perception of it, and I can go back to those albums now and listen to them in a slightly different way and appreciate them slightly more, I would say. But I was really impressed by this. You get 35 songs covering as I say, songs from those 3 albums which I mentioned, Nashville Skyline, Self-Portrait and New Morning, alternate versions from those albums. Then you've got songs which made it onto the albums, but they've got some different mixes on here. Songs like If Dogs Run Free, Sign on the Window, New Morning, which all have horn sections and orchestral overdubs, which is really interesting to hear some of the other alternate mixes which they considered, you know, to go on those albums, especially New Morning, which is interesting. So you've got those, and you got some demos on here, which I guess Dylan recorded, you know, purely for himself and to kind of try some things out, which are cool. And then, probably most importantly, you've got the unreleased tracks, which are kind of central to this bootleg, really make it for me. The unreleased songs, most of which I've never heard before, which is unusual for me considering I'm such a big fan and I own such a huge number of unofficial bootlegs. It's rare for me to find anything from Dylan which I haven't heard, you know, at least snippets from. And there are a good number of songs on here I've never even heard before. I never even knew that he did some of these. They're mostly covers, not original Dylan material, but mostly covers which I guess he planned to put on Self-Portrait originally. But the unreleased songs on here definitely make it for me. Without the unreleased stuff, I don't think this would be really worth picking up or even putting out on a bootleg series volume. But the unreleased stuff on here is amazing. He does some amazing covers on here. I'll run through some of my favorites. You got the 3rd track on the bootleg, which is called Pretty Sorrow. Some of you guys might have heard that song if you've watched any of the promotional videos and stuff that they've done for this. Dylan was really, that was one of the songs that was, you know, kind of soundtracking those promotional videos and adverts and stuff, which is definitely one of my favorite songs. I think it's a cover, but it says unreleased Self-Portrait, so I imagine he initially planned on putting that song on Self-Portrait. So that one's amazing. You've got Spanish is a Loving Tongue, which I think again is a cover, but he does an amazing rendition of that song on here. Very, very moving to listen to. And I don't know who wrote that song originally, but I'd, you know, be pretty surprised if it was a, you know, better version than the one that's on here. So Spanish is a Loving Tongue is the 5th track on here, which is amazing. You've got Thirsty Boots, which I think someone told me was a John Denver cover. I'm not entirely sure about that, but Thirsty Boots is definitely a cover of somebody else, and he does an amazing job again with that. I was blown away by his version of Thirsty Boots, which actually was on a 7-inch single that I picked up on Record Store Day, which was kind of a prelude to this. That had Wigwam on it as well. So Thirsty Boots has to be one of my favourites on here. Again, unreleased. This Evening So Soon, which is a Bob Gibson cover. Dylan does a great job with that song, puts so much passion into the vocals on there. These Hands, again unreleased. You've got Wigwam without overdubs, which is interesting. Alternate version of Country Pie, which was obviously on Nashville Skyline originally. I think he does a better job on the alternate version, and that one's really good. You've got even a version of Highway 61 Revisited on here, which obviously was put out on Dylan's album of 1965 of the same name. You got a version he did here, I imagine in 1970, with the band. Oh no, that's actually with the band at the Isle of Wight. He performed that at the Isle of Wight to critical acclaim. So that song is really good. You've got Tattle O'Day, which again is unreleased. Really enjoyed that song. Belle Isle, which I think is one of the most underrated songs on here. Haven't heard anybody talk about that, but I really enjoyed it. Again, it's kind of a classic American ballad. I imagine it goes back to the 40s or 50s, and it's definitely a cover. But Dylan, again, does an amazing job with the vocals on there. Just makes it sound so personal to him, and I guess that's the art of covering songs. If you can make it personal to you and somewhat relevant to your own, you know, state of mind and your own emotions, then I think that's what makes the best cover songs, and I certainly think he does that on a number of the unreleased songs on Another Self-Portrait. So overall, you get 35 tracks on here, none of which I disliked. There are a few that I was kind of like, meh, but you know, for the most part, this was a great bootleg. I enjoyed listening to it a whole bunch. I'll definitely be playing it more and more. I've probably played this through about 6-7 times now, I would say, and I definitely don't think it's coming to the end of its shelf life. I'll be continuing to play this, you know, pretty much probably up until Christmas pretty regularly, and just really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see what they do next in the bootleg series. Obviously, at the moment they're releasing one every kind of 2 or 3 years, so it might be a while before we see another installment, volume 11, but you know, there's so much unreleased Dylan material, and I can imagine that Columbia have, you know, vaults and vaults of unreleased things, studio takes and stuff that they haven't even, you know, seen the light of day. So I'd love to see them go back to the mid-60s and maybe do a kind of blonde on blonde outtakes bootleg. That would be incredible, but you just can't say where they're going to go next with it, with a career that goes back, you know, 50 odd years. But I'm a massive fan of the bootleg series, and I definitely recommend, if you're into Dylan, this is an essential pickup. But if you're kind of curious about this period in his career, you've never been a fan, then I definitely say pick this up, because it's a kind of missing piece of the jigsaw. It kind of fills in some blanks if you were kind of unsure about this period in Bob's career. So yeah, I was really happy. I guess that was kind of a mini review of this. If you've got any questions, just ask me in the comments. If you pick this up and listen to it, then you know, let me know what your opinion was on it, and I'll be sure to get back to you. But apart from that, that's pretty much all I wanted to do in this video. I hope to come back and maybe make a couple more before going back to university next week, but I have to wait and see. If not, I will attempt to do some when I go back to uni. But that's all I got to say today, guys. Thanks very much for watching Another Self-Portrait. Pick it up, and I shall see you next time. Thanks, guys.